best way to deal with narcissists without arguing. Have you ever had a conversation with someone that started peacefully, but somehow ended with you feeling exhausted, misunderstood, and completely drained? You tried to explain yourself. You tried to prove what actually happened. You tried to make them understand how their words affected you. But instead of bringing peace, the conversation became another argument. And eventually, you may have found yourself asking, why do I keep getting pulled into these conversations? If you've ever experienced this, today's message may change the way you approach difficult people. Because the best way to deal with a person who constantly turns conversations into conflict is not always to argue better. Sometimes it is to stop arguing altogether. And that doesn't mean becoming weak. It doesn't mean allowing someone to mistreat you. It doesn't mean pretending that wrong behavior is acceptable. It means learning how to respond with wisdom instead of reacting from frustration. Today, we're going to look at practical and biblical ways to handle difficult, self-centered, or highly defensive people without constantly getting pulled into arguments. And stay with me until the end, because the final principle may be the most important one of all. Before we begin, if you appreciate Christian content that helps you grow in wisdom, discernment, emotional maturity, and faith, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. And while you're watching, leave a comment below. Peace is more important than winning. That simple statement can remind us of what today's message is really about. Let's begin. 1. Stop trying to win every conversation. One of the biggest mistakes we can make with difficult people is believing that every disagreement must end with the other person admitting that we are right. But that isn't always necessary. There are moments when explaining yourself is helpful. There are moments when correction is appropriate. There are moments when truth needs to be spoken clearly. But there are also moments when continuing the conversation only creates more conflict. Proverbs 26 verse 4 gives a powerful warning about answering foolishness in the wrong way. The Bible is teaching us that wisdom is not simply knowing what to say. Wisdom also involves knowing when not to continue. Think about that. You can have the perfect explanation and still have the wrong conversation. You can have evidence and still be wasting your energy. You can be completely sincere and still discover that the discussion is going nowhere. Sometimes the most mature response is not, "Let me prove my point." It is, "I understand that you see it differently." That sentence doesn't mean you agree. It simply means you're refusing to turn disagreement into a battle. You don't have to win every conversation to protect your peace. 2. Don't confuse boundaries with arguments. A boundary is not an attempt to control another person's behavior. A boundary is a decision about what you will do when a certain behavior occurs. That distinction is extremely important. For example, saying, "You are not allowed to speak to me that way," may turn into another argument. But saying, "If the conversation becomes disrespectful, I'm going to step away and we can talk later," is a boundary. You're not demanding that the other person become a different person immediately. You're simply deciding what you will participate in. Jesus himself demonstrated the importance of knowing when to engage and when to withdraw. There were times when Jesus answered questions. There were times when he taught patiently. There were times when he corrected people. And there were also times when he refused to participate in pointless exchanges. This is something we often forget. Being a Christian does not mean giving everyone unlimited access to your attention, your emotions, or your time. You can love someone and still have boundaries. You can forgive someone and still create distance. You can pray for someone without continuing the same unhealthy conversation every day. That is not hatred. That is wisdom. 3. Stop over-explaining yourself. Have you ever noticed that the more you explain yourself, the more things there seem to be to argue about? You explain what you meant. Then you have to explain why you said it. Then you explain why you reacted. Then you explain what happened before that. And suddenly, a simple conversation has become an hour-long debate. This is where we need to learn the power of simplicity. You don't always need a 10-minute explanation for a simple decision. You can say, "I've made my decision. I don't agree. I'm not comfortable with that. I'll think about it. I don't want to continue this conversation right now." Those statements are clear. They don't attack the other person. They don't invite unnecessary debate. And they don't require you to defend every detail of your life. Remember this: you are allowed to make reasonable decisions without presenting a courtroom case for every decision you make. Not everyone needs to understand your boundaries before you are allowed to have them. 4. Don't respond while you're angry. This principle can completely change difficult relationships. When someone says something that hurts you, your first instinct may be to respond immediately. But Proverbs 15 verse 1 says, "A soft answer turns away wrath." Notice what that verse does not say. It doesn't say that you should become a doormat. It doesn't say that you should accept injustice. It teaches us about the power of our response. There is a difference between responding and reacting. A reaction says, "You always do this. You're impossible." A response says, "I don't think this conversation is productive right now." A reaction is driven by the emotional moment. A response gives you room to choose wisdom. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is pause. Take a breath. Pray. Walk away for a moment. Think carefully. Then speak. You don't have to match someone's emotional intensity. If someone raises their voice, you don't have to raise yours. If someone becomes sarcastic, you don't have to become sarcastic. If someone becomes defensive, you don't have to become defensive. You can remain calm, and calmness is not weakness. It is self-control. 5. Learn the difference between truth and accusation. There is a major difference between saying, "What you did hurt me," and saying, "You are a horrible person." The first addresses behavior and impact. The second attacks identity. When dealing with difficult people, stay as close to observable facts as possible. Instead of, "You never respect me," try, "When you interrupted me repeatedly, I felt that the conversation wasn't respectful." Instead of, "You always manipulate everyone," try, "I don't feel comfortable agreeing to this, so I'm going to say no." Instead of, "You're a narcissist," try, "I don't think this conversation is healthy for me right now." This is especially important because labels can sometimes make difficult situations worse. The word narcissist is often used casually online to describe someone who is self-centered, defensive, controlling, or difficult. But only a qualified professional can diagnose a personality disorder. So rather than trying to diagnose someone from a YouTube video, focus on the behavior you can actually observe. Ask yourself, what happened? What behavior am I responding to? What boundary do I need? What would a wise response look like? That keeps the conversation grounded in reality. 6. Don't let their reaction decide your identity. This is one of the hardest lessons. Someone can misunderstand you. Someone can criticize you. Someone can accuse you unfairly. And you may immediately feel the need to prove that you are a good person. But remember, someone else's opinion of you does not automatically become God's opinion of you. Your identity cannot depend on whether everyone approves of you. Jesus himself was misunderstood. He was criticized. He was falsely accused. Yet he didn't spend his entire ministry trying to convince everyone to like him. There is a lesson here. If your entire sense of peace depends on another person's approval, you will constantly feel unstable. But when your identity is rooted in Christ, you can say, "I know who I am before God." That doesn't mean you ignore legitimate correction. A wise person should be willing to examine themselves. But there is a difference between receiving constructive correction and becoming emotionally controlled by every accusation. Not every criticism requires a defense. Sometimes you need to listen. Sometimes you need to learn. And sometimes you simply need to let the accusation pass. 7. Choose your battles carefully. Not every problem deserves the same amount of energy. Imagine someone makes a small comment that annoys you. You could spend the next 2 hours thinking about it. You could replay the conversation. You could imagine what you should have said. You could prepare your response. Or you could decide, "This isn't worth my peace." That's wisdom. Your attention is valuable. Your emotional energy is valuable. Your time is valuable. And you should be careful about giving all three to endless conflict. Ecclesiastes 3 reminds us that there is a time to speak and a time to remain silent. That means maturity isn't simply knowing how to speak. It is knowing when speaking will actually accomplish something. Ask yourself, will responding solve anything? Will this conversation produce understanding? Is this an important issue or just an irritating moment? Am I responding because it is necessary, or because I want the other person to admit that I'm right? Those questions can save you from many unnecessary arguments. 8. Don't try to change someone through pressure. This may be one of the most freeing lessons you can learn. You cannot force another person to become emotionally mature. You cannot argue someone into humility. You cannot debate someone into self-awareness. You cannot pressure someone into changing their heart. Real change has to come from within. That doesn't mean you become passive. You can communicate clearly. You can establish boundaries. You can stop participating in destructive patterns. You can seek wise counsel. You can create distance when necessary. But you don't have to spend your life trying to transform another person's personality. Sometimes we become exhausted because we have taken responsibility for something that isn't ours to control. Your responsibility is your own conduct, your words, your choices, your boundaries, your relationship with God. You can pray for another person. You can hope they grow. You can forgive them, but you cannot live their life for them. 9. Use short, calm responses. When a conversation becomes repetitive, shorter responses can sometimes be healthier. You don't have to respond to every accusation. You don't have to answer every provocative question. You don't have to defend every detail. Sometimes you can simply say, I hear you. I understand your perspective. I don't agree. I'll consider what you've said. I'm not going to argue about this. We can talk when we're both calm. I've already explained my position. Those statements are not insults. They are not attacks. They simply close the door to unnecessary escalation. And here's something important. Being calm doesn't guarantee that the other person will become calm. You cannot control their response. Your goal isn't to make them behave perfectly. Your goal is to make sure you are responding according to your values. That is where your responsibility ends. 10. Know when distance is necessary. Sometimes the healthiest response to a consistently destructive relationship is increased distance. That doesn't automatically mean hatred. It doesn't mean revenge. It doesn't mean you want something bad to happen to the person. It may simply mean you recognize that repeated exposure to unhealthy conflict is damaging your ability to live peacefully. There are situations where direct communication can help. There are situations where counseling can help. There are situations where trusted family members, church leaders, or qualified professionals can provide guidance. And there are situations where stronger boundaries are necessary. If someone is threatening you, physically harming you, stalking you, or placing you in danger, don't reduce the situation to simply learning how to communicate better. Seek appropriate help and prioritize safety. Wisdom includes knowing when a situation requires more than a conversation. 11. Forgiveness does not mean unlimited access. This is especially important for Christians. Sometimes people hear the word forgiveness and assume it means allowing the same behavior to continue indefinitely. But forgiveness and reconciliation are not identical. Forgiveness can mean releasing your desire to personally repay someone for the wrong they committed. Reconciliation, however, involves rebuilding trust. And trust is normally rebuilt through consistent behavior over time. If someone apologizes, you can forgive. But you don't have to pretend the relationship is exactly where it was before. If someone repeatedly breaks trust, you can forgive while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. You can say, I don't hate you. I pray that things become better. But I also need to protect the peace and health of this relationship. That's not necessarily bitterness. That's discernment. 12. Let God handle what you cannot control. This may be the hardest principle of all. Sometimes we become obsessed with getting justice from people. We want them to admit what they did. We want everyone to know our side. We want them to finally understand how much they hurt us. We want them to regret their behavior. But eventually, you have to surrender something. You have to surrender the need to control the outcome. Romans 12 verse 19 reminds believers not to take personal vengeance, because justice ultimately belongs to God. That doesn't mean ignoring wrongdoing. It means refusing to make revenge your mission. You can pursue appropriate justice. You can seek help. You can protect yourself. You can speak truth. But you don't have to destroy your own peace trying to punish someone emotionally. God sees what you cannot see. God knows what you do not know. And God can work in situations you cannot control. Sometimes your greatest victory is not watching the other person lose. Sometimes your greatest victory is realizing that they no longer control your emotional state. Think about that. What if they can criticize you without destroying your confidence? What if they can disagree with you without pulling you into an argument? What if they can misunderstand you without forcing you to spend hours proving yourself? What if you can walk away from the conversation and still have peace? That is growth. That is emotional maturity. That is self-control. And for a Christian, it is also an opportunity to demonstrate the character of Christ. The goal isn't to defeat the person. So let's bring everything together. If you're dealing with someone who is consistently self-centered, defensive, argumentative, or difficult, your goal should not be to defeat them. Your goal should be to respond wisely. Speak clearly. Stay calm. Set reasonable boundaries. Don't over-explain. Don't insult. Don't diagnose. Don't retaliate. Don't make every disagreement a spiritual battle. And don't allow someone else's behavior to determine the kind of person you become. Because here's the danger. You can become so focused on another person's unhealthy behavior that you start responding in unhealthy ways yourself. You become angry. You become obsessed. You constantly replay conversations. You start thinking about revenge. You begin to lose your peace. And eventually, the person you were trying to protect yourself from is occupying your thoughts every day. That's not freedom. Freedom means you can recognize unhealthy behavior without allowing it to consume your life. You can say, I see what is happening. I know what I will and will not participate in. And I am going to leave the rest in God's hands. That is a powerful place to reach. ## final encouragement. Maybe you're watching this because you're currently dealing with someone difficult. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's someone at work. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's someone you've known for years. And perhaps you've spent months trying to find the perfect words that will finally make everything change. But maybe the answer isn't finding better arguments. Maybe the answer is developing better boundaries. Maybe it's learning when to speak, when to remain silent, when to walk away, when to forgive, when to seek help, and when to trust God with what you cannot control. Remember this, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to defend yourself against every accusation. You don't have to prove your worth to someone who refuses to recognize it. And you don't have to become harsh simply because someone else is difficult. Let your response be guided by wisdom. Let your boundaries be guided by discernment. Let your words be guided by love. And let your peace be anchored in God. If this message helped you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Complete this sentence. One thing I'm learning about dealing with difficult people is, you don't have to share private details or name anyone. Just share the lesson you've learned. Your comment may encourage someone else who is going through something similar. And if you know someone who constantly finds themselves pulled into unnecessary arguments, consider sharing this video with them. Most importantly, remember this, you cannot control another person's behavior. But with God's help, you can control how you respond. You can choose wisdom over reaction, peace over unnecessary conflict, boundaries over resentment, forgiveness over revenge, and faith over the need to control every outcome. May God give you discernment to know when to speak, courage to establish healthy boundaries, humility to receive correction, and peace to release what you cannot control. And when difficult people challenge you, may you remember that your greatest victory is not proving that you are right. Sometimes your greatest victory is remaining faithful to who God has called you to be. Keep seeking truth. Keep growing in wisdom. Keep your heart anchored in Christ. And remember, you don't have to win every argument to walk in victory. God bless you.